This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
And now, on with the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to
We're Watching Here.
This is Opinionated Movie Talk with Chris and Perry. My name is Chris Williams. With me, he is the Sal to my Sonny, Perry Seibert.
I finally get to be John Cazale. Yes, my live stream has happened.
Aren't that many chances to be that either?
No, only get 5 of them.
Well, I'm really excited. We're actually back on schedule, which is nice. It kind of, it at least put its chaos into our schedule, which was nice. But we are continuing our series of movies of the 70s, summer of the 70s. And we've got a Sidney Lumet double feature today. We are talking about Network and Dog Day Afternoon, but not in that order. And I'm excited to talk about these. These are really interesting movies to dive into. But Perry, first, what have you been watching?
I went to see David Lowery's The Green Knight. I am the only human on the planet, I think, who saw it in the theater.
You are not. I can guarantee that.
Excellent. You did too. All right, good deal. And boy, so this was a project that I have no great feelings towards the Arthurian legend one way or the other. I don't need to hear this story over and over. I'm somewhat familiar with it. I will tell you that I acted in a stage production of Camelot in high school. But I thought that tackling an Arthurian legend like he does with The Green Knight was almost ideal for David Lowery, who's a director who is so poetic, and his poetry is mostly visual. I also think he's a spectacular writer, but he's the one director to me who has figured out how to take from Terrence Malick what Malick does best and actually use it in a way that is way more accessible than Malick is at his most gone. And Lowery, I think Lowery thinks like a poet, and he thinks in the sense that he thinks about theme, and he thinks about meaning, and he thinks about how everything is interconnected, and about how time is relative, and all in these really poetic ways through all of his movies. I think work at this level, even the Pete's Dragon remake, and and I think that this is no exception. I think it just gives him an ideal canvas to work with. The film is mysterious and strange and funny, and it isn't confusing, but you don't exactly know for sure what's going on much of the time. And yet you feel like you understand what the main character's doing most of the time. Like what he's doing makes sense, even though you're as confused as he is. All to an ending that is just like all of his endings, just beautiful. He knows how to build a film to pay off for a final sequence as good as any director alive. I'm a big fan, and I think this is a really great project. I was bummed out when I saw the box office returns on it from the first weekend, but can't be surprised with no star and from a small company like A24 testing the waters of what box office looks like for a film like this post-pandemic.
Yeah, I'm really glad you saw this. I'm a big David Lowery fan. I think A Ghost Story was my number one film of the year there it came out.
I think I remember that.
I really like that one. And I do think he's directed the only Disney remake that has any soul to it.
Yes.
I really do like his Pete's Dragon remake. I felt much the same way about this. I have been excited about this one for a long time. Like you, I'm not really big into the Arthurian legend. I like Monty Python. That might be as far as it goes for me for the most part. But I can remember seeing the trailer for this, I want to say 2 years ago, because they started coming out with trailers for this summer before it was supposed to be released, which was last May.
Right.
So I've been waiting on this one for a very long time. Yeah, I loved it. I told you right before recording, that the theater I was in was fairly packed for a Friday night show. And then about halfway through, I noticed the theater was less packed, and people were getting restless. People were getting impatient. There were some giggles at parts that kind of irritated me. But I didn't care. I loved it. It was I feel like going back to movies, I wrote about this in my newsletter recently. So I feel like going back to the movies lately has been so often, it's just something I do out of reflex. It's back. So I go see Fast 9 and I go see Black Widow, but I haven't really had the experience where I've gone to the movies and I felt like, oh, I'm leaving chewing on something. I'm leaving, nitpicking something or tearing, pulling it apart in my head on the way home. And this is a movie that makes you work. And I don't mean that as a negative at all. You need to pay attention to what's going on. You need to accept that for much of this movie, there are things that don't make sense on the surface. You have to go back and look at the totality of it to see how it plays into that theme. I went back and started reading articles about, how this ties into the original legend, but also how it departs from it, which he has a character in there who talks about sometimes if she likes, thinks the story should be different, she rewrites it. And he does that here. And yeah, I loved it. It is gorgeous. It has some of the most striking images I've seen in a long time. I really like Dev Patel and Alicia Vikander in this. I don't want to say too much because I do think people need to just go see it. I think it is a movie that many people went into maybe hoping it was like a Lord of the Rings, and it is not. It is not a swashbuckler. It is a epic poem and put to film.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It is challenging to watch, as the original text has been for many people to wrestle with in English classes.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
I'm glad he did that. I'm glad he respected that. I'm glad he respected his audience. I can't fathom how this is not one of my favorite movies of the year.
Yeah, I am with you. I am. It is the first thing I've seen in a long time that I am super excited to see again. Yeah. I haven't had that experience in a while, and where it's like, oh, and again, this made me so happy to be back in a theater.
Yeah,
that this is the kind of film that it is designed to make you pay attention, and so that's why you go to the theater.
Exactly. Yeah. So speaking of auteurs, I've got what we've been watching. It is summertime, and in summer, sometimes you like to go out, you like to go to the beach. Sometimes you go to the beach and you get a suntan. Sometimes, Perry, you go to a beach and you get old. And
I
saw M. Night Shyamalan's Old. And oh man, I was thinking about this the other day because Kevin Smith started shooting Clerks 3, right? Sure. And Kevin Smith is one of those guys who almost every time lately he's up at bat, it's a whiff for me. And yet I keep giving him more chances because his work had such an impact on me in the 90s that I'm like, I'm always going to try and root for the guy. I always hope he's going to come back to that. M. Night Shyamalan is kind of the same way with me. Like,
you're way more forgiving than I am. That's because you're a better person than I am.
The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs, even The Village are movies I like quite a bit. And so I keep hoping he's going to turn out a good one. And sometimes I'm rewarded and you get something like, I really liked Split. Sometimes you get something like Glass, which was really bad. Old is a bad movie that I like. It is the best and worst of him on display. If you've seen the previews, this is a movie about a family and a group of tourists that go to a beach where they start getting rapidly older over the course of an afternoon. I am at the age right now where I'm watching my kids grow up really quickly. I'm watching my parents get older. I'm watching myself get older. So
gotcha.
There's a vested interest in the topic here. And this isn't the emotional terror that I had thought it was going to be. It's not about the emotional weight of getting older. and I have Synecdoche, New York for that. When he lets this be a body horror movie, it's actually quite effective. Like, he knows how to get under my skin. He knows how to deliver an image that is really grotesque and shocking. He's really good with suspense pieces, and really, I mean, it's unrelenting for the middle hour of this movie. Like, the middle hour of this movie is really well composed. His camera angles are great. He's doing some really good subtle work with the aging. And then it gets really scary and really disturbing. The problem is that is sandwiched between a really flat beginning and a really nonsensical ending. He does this thing. I can't fault the actors because, I mean, it's Gabriel Garcia Bernal, Vicky Krieps, Rufus Sewell. They're all good actors.
Yes, they are.
And Shyamalan has this tendency. It's definitely a trick he turns to, and he does intentionally, because he does it in all his movies, where his actors are directed to give the weirdest line readings I have ever heard. Like, they talk like no one on the planet has ever talked.
Yes.
And it doesn't help that the dialogue they're given is the most didactic, stilted dialogue I have ever heard. And so the first half hour of this movie, I'm at a remove because none of this feels remotely real. And maybe he's going for something dreamlike, but it doesn't work. Then the movie builds to a point where I thought, this is a great haunting ending. It's going to stick with me. This is what I was hoping it was going to be. And then it goes on to explain everything for 20 minutes in a way that sucks the air out of the eye. So Shyamalan's going to Shyamalan. I will say, I mean, he's a big director who is not,
he's not.
This is based on a graphic novel, but he's doing something, he's taking a swing, and I appreciate that he's doing something original. I appreciate this was a movie that didn't deliver what I thought it was going to deliver. Like, it's not the Marvel McDonald's sandwich of the week, it's
sure,
it's there, but man, it's the good and the bad. And it's old. It's some of it works really well, and I'll recommend it for that. But man, his worst indulgences are on full display there.
I don't know if we've ever talked about this on the podcast. I don't know if I've ever explained this whole thing to you before about M. Night, because I usually just take every possible pot shot I can at the man's work. But for me, at my most poetic about being a film lover, I think of, I have relationships with directors and actors that's really personal, and I understand that, and it means something to me to be a critic, and I'm not demanding that other people recognize that. I'm not saying I'm offended if you don't think of me that way, or if that's not the first thing you think about, but that's what I think of myself as. And no director has ever, I have never felt as personally attacked as I was by Lady in the Water. It's truthfully, it's a giant fuck you to me personally. And at that point, I truly loathe the man's work. And when I say, and if I just say I loathe the man, I just mean his work. I loathe M. Night Shyamalan, the director, because he loathes me personally. It's not like who's the Danish director? It's not Lars von Trier, who hates everybody. That's not personal. But M. Night hates me. And I have always responded in kind from that movie on. And you know what? I've never been wrong. I have not seen much of his stuff since then, honestly. I've no need to have that dysfunctional relationship in my life, so I don't allow it.
I feel like he has settled into a routine where he understands he's a B movie director, and he leans into that, which makes him it a little bit easier to go down. Lady in the Water, gosh, it's not just that he's attacking critics, that he has a critic character who is eaten by a giant porcupine
and is responsible for everything that has gone wrong. Don't forget that. Like, people pass on this movie as one of the most angry, self-indulgent things a director has ever made.
Well, yeah, because in contrast to the critic who makes everything wrong, M. Night Shyamalan casts himself as the writer who's going to change the world. And I was so excited when that came out. And I I remember when that came out. It came out on my birthday. And my
punch
dad,
to the gut.
Yeah, my dad was like, "Well, let's go see a movie for your birthday." And he was trying to sell me on You, Me, and Dupree. And
Better
I'm like,
movie. Better movie.
Well, about halfway through, I did turn to him and go, "We should have saw You, Me, and Dupree." So yeah. Yeah, Old. If you're not a fan, this isn't going to make you one.
Good.
If you're interested in it, there's some interesting stuff. I think I was kinder to it in my review than I'm being here. It's a mixed bag. It's M. Night Shyamalan.
It's M. Night. It's M. Night gonna M. Night, like you said.
Exactly. So let's talk about some good movies. We
Let's
did talk about The Green Knight, which is a great movie. We talked about Old, which is not. But we're going to go further back. We're going to continue our series, Summer of the 70s. If you haven't listened to our episodes on the Godfather trilogy and Chinatown, make sure you take some time to go back after this, listen to those. I've had a great time doing this. We are doing a double feature, which I don't know that we've done before. 2 movies from the same director, made, I believe, a year apart.
A year 2. I can never remember if Dog Day is 73 or 74. I think it's. I always think it's 73.
Dog Day is 75.
Oh, that's right.
And
Network is 76. Yep.
So a year apart. Movies that honestly are very different from each other. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about these. And we'll start with Dog Day Afternoon because it did come first, but also I had not seen this movie before. It's been a few years since I'd seen Netflix Network. But Dog Day Afternoon was my my first time with. Perry, why don't you tell the good listeners what this movie is about?
Dog Day Afternoon is based on a true story about a bank robbery in New York. It stars Al Pacino and Vincent Cassel as the 2 bank robbers. And it is this fantastic, almost real time. It's not really real time, but it feels real time. Exploration of what happens as this bank robbery turns into a hostage situation. And it plays with elements of media, which is really smartly and in a way that is even more entertaining to me now, seeing how it gets everything right. Like everything that happens would still happen today. It would just happen in a different way. You know, this is very much about television news, local TV news, filming what's going on. And now it would all be Facebook Live. But other than that, it would still break down the same way. And that's really interesting to me. You can see how real and true the human stuff is, because you could remake this with the modern technology and you could still do it really well.
Oh yeah.
Not that I think this film should be remade in any way, but just pointing out how timeless it is while still being very much a film set in 1975. It deals with LGBTQ stuff in a really interesting way, I think, even by today's standards. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're dealing with 40 plus years of back thinking, but I think deals with it really well and really humanely. And I think it is underrated in that capacity. I think it's a very interesting film in that regard. And all of it wrapped up in, arguably for me, Al Pacino's finest performance. I could say this about 3 or 4 performances, so I'm not going to demand it's the best. And the biggest and best part John Cazale ever got, who's an actor who can do no wrong. And I'll say this last thing before I lob it over to you, Chris. This film has, for me, an objectively perfect first act. I don't think you can find a more perfect first 20 minutes to a movie than this movie. I think it sets everything up so well. And even the reveal that takes you into Act 2 is this wonderful, stumbling reveal of the gun that Pacino has. He can't do it smoothly. It's this incredibly humane and human bumbling act that reveals what's going on now in the movie, that changes everything. That's really, really memorable and great, and just a great piece of physical acting from Pacino.
Well, there had been a reason why I hadn't seen this movie, and it wasn't for like, oh, I think it's going to be bad. I think I assumed that this was going to be one of those movies that kind of set the template for a certain genre, and every other film has milked off it for 40 years. I really thought this was like, I knew very little about this going in. And so I knew it was about a robbery. And so I'm like, oh, this is a movie about a group of bank robbers and how they get away with the perfect heist and all that, like just your typical robbery movie. And what you bring up about the reveal of the gun, what shocked me, like in the first 20 to 30 minutes of this, is how it is the worst robbery that you may have ever seen. These are not crack robbers. These are people who really have no business robbing. I mean, no one has any business robbing a bank, but they're not prepared for this. Sonny thinks he knows how he can do this. He thinks he's got it figured out, but you brought up the word human so many times when talking about this movie. And I think that is the key. It's everything goes wrong from the fact that one of the guys bows out and almost takes the car home.
It's so good.
The money's not there. Sonny doesn't know how to handle a gun. And that instantly made it a much more interesting movie and made me much more invested in everyone in it. And what I was surprised is as it played out, I could empathize with everyone. There was no good guy or bad guy for me. This was Sonny and Sal trying to make it through this mess that they've created because they are ill-equipped to do this. It's the hostages trying to, keep their cool and, just hoping they stay alive. But then even the cops, when they're brought in, they're just doing their job. They're not there's a few side cops who are very overzealous. But the Charles Durning, and I'm forgetting the other one. Shoot. James Broderick.
Yeah.
They're not who we would have today where they're, take them out right away. They're trying to end this peacefully. And so everyone's just trying to do the right thing over this long, horrible, hot day. And I had no idea where any of this was going. And I loved every minute of this.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to watch this so closely after The Godfather. And Pacino's role is just as good, maybe better as his work there, but so different too. Like this is a little bit more in places the Pacino I grew up with, where he's a little louder. But he's also a very quiet, not stressed.
Yeah.
And the thing I appreciate was how he creates Sonny into this character who he's put the entire world on his shoulder. He wants to take care of everyone.
Everybody. Yes.
And that is what damns him in the end. That's his downfall, is he thinks he can take care of everyone from his lover to his wife to getting, promising Sal that, we're going to kill ourselves when we get out of here if we don't get out of this.
To all of the hostages. Yeah. That's the great. I think I have talked about before with you about how I am a sucker for hostage settings for a movie or a television episode. I find it it is a perfect field in which to play. You can go in so many directions with a hostage situation. And that's probably because I love this movie so much and saw it at the perfect age to see it. It has always stuck with me as a place where if you're at all creative and know how to write people, you will inevitably find interesting things to tell and do. Mm-hmm. And while that is true, nobody's done it better than this.
No, this is fantastic. What I also love is even the hostages. They have their own inner, like they're first terrified, as you would imagine, but then others seem to they like being in the spotlight. They're arguing for Sonny and Sal. There's a little community forming there, and it's so fun to watch. Even as it kind of starts very comedic in places, but it gets so taut by the end of the movie.
Oh yeah,
those final moments, and God, yeah, this was great.
So, Mike, if you have not read Sidney Lumet's book on directing, Cannot recommend it highly enough. It is as good a primer as any director has ever written on how you actually direct a movie. But he tells a story that has stuck with me forever. So if there is a big showpiece acting moment in the film, it is about 2/3 of the way through when Al Pacino is put on the phone with his wife. First with his lover and then his wife and lover. I'm forgetting the order. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of the story. And it is literally just him on the phone. And I think, if I remember correctly, even with the wife, there's no cut to the wife. You just see this play out on Pacino the entire time. I could be wrong, but that's how I'm remembering it at this moment. But Lumet put a camera down like behind a black curtain and cut a hole in the curtain so the lens could come out, so that Pacino wasn't looking at a camera. He wanted this to be as small and as intimate as it could possibly be. And he had Pacino, and he knew this was going to be in one take. And so he had Pacino do the entire thing. And he writes in the book about how he knew Pacino just naturally is such an actor, brings such intensity even when he's quiet, and he thought that would be just a hair too much. Even as he knew Pacino would play it perfectly, but it would just be a bit much. And he wanted the character completely exhausted. This is him at absolute wit's end after this exhausting day. And so Pacino does the entire scene, both of these conversations. And then Lumet said, do it again. And the second time he had him turn the camera on. And Pacino did it again, and then did it just a little bit flatter because he'd had to do it once and had gone through all of it. And that's the take that's in the movie. And it's a great piece of direction. It's a great story that reminds you that how much actors are at the mercy of directors. Don't be very careful if you want to blame an actor for being bad. It's often the director's fault. And just as likely, it's often the director who's really good if you're getting a really good performance. Now, with Pacino, we were going to get a good performance regardless. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I'm saying they deserved each other on this one. That it's a really great moment and just literally a masterclass in acting. That scene is so good.
It's funny you brought up that book, because as I was watching this and then Network, I was doing a little bit of reading on them, and I think Roger Ebert brought up the book. It's like, oh, if you love movies, this is one of the best books you should read.
Yeah.
So I went on Amazon and I ordered it, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. But it's funny you bring up the phone call, because the moment that got me, that just kind of put me on the edge of my seat a little bit more, paying attention a little more closely, was the other call, the call with Leon.
Yes.
With Sarandon. And that is a shot where it takes place in this barbershop that the FBI has commandeered. And when the call starts on Leon, I had no idea where he was. Like, you're in this barbershop and you hear the voice. I'm like, who's talking? And it fits. He's very timid at that point. He doesn't want to be really talking to Sonny. And throughout the call, the camera just really slowly creeps in closer as he's getting more of his confidence, as he's talking more openly, until it's right in his face.
Yeah.
And it's just very slow track across the barbershop. And it's such a good sequence. I mean, I think that obviously we're talking about two Lumet films. I think what he does so well is he creates this very palpable real world. This is not a heightened reality. This is not a slick Michael Mann movie, and nothing. I love Michael Mann, but this feels like it's taking place in a real city at this time. It opens with this montage of daily life that I believe was actually, in one of the reviews I read, he filmed it like without people noticing. He's just capturing life on the city.
Day in the
but
city,
also
day in New York.
There's this song playing over it that, it's
Elton John's America, right?
Yes.
I think it is. Yeah.
And, it's playing, and it's kind of just the music you hear as this montage is going. But then when you meet Sonny and Sal, they're listening to that song in the car. It becomes part of the fabric of the film, and it just does such a good job immersing you right away. It's such a and yeah, no, it takes a really solid director to have something, to have chaos that feels this realistic. Like,
Yeah.
It feels real. Every moment of this feels real and lived in and grounded.
Yes. And that's a fascinating contrast to the next film we're going to talk about, which doesn't. And is also perfectly set. Like he has figured out the exact tone to tell that story, which is very slick and very glossy looking.
Yeah.
As opposed to this, which isn't like ugly by any means, but it is urban in the traditional sense of the word, not in the coded sense of the word. You are always in the city in Dog Day Afternoon. Even when you're in the bank's in the city, and there is life going on just outside that bank that these people are all waiting to get back to, and has been interrupted because of this. And it's it all adds to making them utterly believable. You could, like you were saying, you could easily have a favorite hostage in this movie. You get to know them individually, not perfectly. I don't remember any of their names in all the times I've seen the movie. I don't care. I don't need to. I can picture them. I know what they do. I know how they are. And it's great. It is such a, it is remarkable to see something that, like you said at the beginning, you expect to be this genre workout, and you realize it is just an excuse to have these incredibly intimate human interactions that don't need to be hyped up because the situation's already tense enough. The actors are still playing the tension of the situation. There may be a character or two who feels less tense at any given moment, as you would, I have to imagine, if you were involved in a hostage situation that went 12 hours. You're not going to be at wit's end the entire 12 hours. And that's great. And Lumet, like you were saying with that sequence where he pushes in, just observes. And he always manages to observe from exactly the right distance. It's not like an Ozu film where we just plant the camera and everything plays out like a proscenium. And it's not this intrusive, we're going to get as close as possible so you can see everything play out. It's just, I'm going to find the right distance to put the camera to capture the emotion I want to capture in this sequence. It's so purposeful and does not feel like you are being forced to look at anything.
Yeah.
In particular. It's really masterful.
I love how you can just feel the desperation that Sonny feels too. Like this is a man who's trying to rob a bank to get money for his lover's sex change because his lover has tried to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And but he's also trying to also maintain a family life that is also falling apart. And we learn he's been snapping. And you just feel like from the moment Pacino walks in that bank, you just feel the weight about Sonny. Like, just, you understand what's brought him to this point. You understand, even if you understand too, this is the wrong decision, and it's none of this is. He comes off as this guy who always thinks he knows what that solution's going to be, what that fix is going to be, and it makes it worse for everyone.
Coupled with, again, the brilliant performance by John Cazale, which again goes with the screenplay. I want to credit this. This is a great screenplay too. It's not just a matter of great direction. There is a scene, there's a conversation, and I forget where it happens in the movie. I can't remember if it's halfway or 2/3 of the way through, where you realize for sure finally what Sal is. And it is the moment at which the film goes, I don't want to say fully dark, but where it commits to darkness. and I say that I mean that literally. The film goes from light to dark. It starts during the day, it ends overnight that night. And that progression is very important thematically. And that's that, to have this guy who wants to, like you said, take care of everybody, that he feels such a sense of responsibility, to have it play out where he realizes now he has maybe picked somebody who he shouldn't have, someone who that wasn't the right person to invest in, is this just amazing scene where he can't fully get rid of it. And he realizes, oh, oh, this is where he understands he's made this error, this life error.
Yeah.
And again, you've said it perfectly, and the movie never brings it up. The movie never states it this way. It does not give it to you in a verbal bow for you to understand this character by any means. It's just the way it plays out.
No, and you learn, like, if I'm thinking about the same thing you are, is it the Wyoming conversation?
I think so. I forget where it comes in, but
where he's what country do you want to go to? Wyoming. Wyoming's not a country. And you just realize this is a guy who Sal's a guy who isn't all there. No. And then there even lines that you think would be, they would almost seem humorous on a certain, like that line is kind of humorous until you also learn he's never been on a plane before. And oh my gosh, things aren't going to turn out for this guy who is in way over his head. Yeah. Which was honestly, when he shows up in the movie, my thought was, oh, this is a dangerous guy. He's the wild card, he's a guy who is not prepared for this and should not, no one should be involved with this, but especially him. He's not the guy you call to carry out a master plan.
Right. And the genius, like you said, even like I said, why I think it's a perfect first act, to have the third guy in on it, just be like, Sonny, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I gotta go. And he lets him go. Which is,
I love it. He's gonna take the car.
He saw it. Sonny was given this opportunity to realize once again, you can get out of this. It's that great, it's that great inversion of the refusal of the call. In the traditional hero's journey. It's this great inverse of that. Yeah. And one of the many reasons I love the movies. I love the movie structure. It's such a perfect film. I don't like using that phrase very often, but in the sense that every shot is there for a purpose, none of it is repetitious, and every scene is necessary.
And it's a perfect movie. Anything. Like,
no, not at all.
I don't know how careful we got to be with spoilers in a nearly 50-year-old
You are nearly warned now, people.
So when you get to the end of the movie and you find out, Sonny got played by the cops, and then you replay back the fact that his downfall is he thought he had outsmarted the cops.
Yeah.
And the movie doesn't highlight that. It's just the moment where he's like, oh no, that guy's a cop. I want this guy.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, that was their plan. And, Sonny once again thought he knew more than he knew. And it ends. And not only, the heartbreaking death of Sal, which is so abrupt and it shocked me, but also the cards at the end that tell you what happened to everyone.
Yes.
Which is heartbreaking. It doesn't highlight that too much. It's just there. It trusts the audience, which kind of gets into the other point I want to talk about, which might be a good way to transition into Network 2. I honestly, and I like Network a lot, I feel like the depiction of the media in this might even be more effective than in Network. In the fact, or maybe it's just that I prefer where it's not boldface underlined satire, and I just and again, we'll get to Network, which is a movie I really like, but I just love the fact that it plays out here, that Sonny becomes this kind of folk hero until the crowds, some of the crowd starts to turn on him when they find out he's gay, and he becomes this media superstar in the space of an afternoon and sees himself on TV, and how that all plays out without having to underline, isn't this a circus, folks? Isn't this crazy? It's the commentary is part of the story, and it's not shoving it in your face. And I appreciate that. I appreciate what Network does, but I appreciate a movie that can do that without reminding me that it's doing that.
Yes. I think that's a really, I have a harder time, I have an easy time comparing the two films on those terms. I have a hard time contrasting them on those two terms, because I think they are doing two very different things. I mean, the satire in Network, to me, it it is not necessarily about the media itself. It sort of accepts that's what media does. It already establishes that both films already accept the power the media has, right? But where Dog Day Afternoon shows how it affects people who consume it, Network is an attack on the mindset that delivers it.
Sure. Yeah,
which is two very different modes of attack. And of course, and since we might as well transition fully to it, the other thing for me is that, as much as Network is brilliantly directed by Sidney Lumet, it's so Paddy Chayefsky's film. Yeah. It is so Paddy Chayefsky's film that I have that's the other reason I hadn't thought about it like that. And that's great. Thank you for bringing that up. I hadn't thought about comparing their approaches to the media, but that's I think they're an interesting. It's just another reason they're a great double feature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting they were made so closely together, which, directors make different types of movies all the time, but it's just they are two completely different experiences. From the same director. And I do think Lumet grounds Chayefsky's script really well. Like there are times where it feels like there are real people in this, and it's a real world, and it's a tangible world.
It's a tangible world. Yeah. I'll give it that. I don't think for a minute these people are real. And I don't mind that. That's not a knock. Mm-hmm. That is simply to say, I think that, because again, as we were talking about with Old, nobody in Network talks that. It is a poet, and Chayefsky's a good enough writer to get away with it. Nobody talks in the real world the way Coen Brothers characters talk either. Mm-hmm. They're still brilliantly written because they're all written of a piece, as Network is.
Yeah. I had seen Network a few years ago. I was taking a class on movies about the media and politics, and that was one of the films we watched. And I really liked it then. I really liked it going back now. The thing I think that took me back, the thing that I keep coming back to, is this weird feeling like when you talk about Dog Day Afternoon, like you said, that's a movie that with very little changes could take place today, right? And it would still feel resonant, and it would still feel the themes are still very relevant. The transgender theme, the media theme is still there. With Network, there's a part of me that wonders how this felt in 1976 when it was this very over, isn't this crazy satire? And now it takes place, and it's still, to me, just as smart and as brilliant. But I'm like, oh, we've kind of lapped this in many ways, right? Like, we already are at the place where there are news stations that have mingled entertainment and the news. That's a very reality right now. When they talk about, marshaling the rage of people, TV doesn't do that as much anymore because TV did it so well for so long, but now we have that right at our fingertips. It almost, there's a point where it almost feels quaint. As quaint as a movie that features an on-air assassination at the very end can feel.
And yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. They it's so I go back and forth on this because I still think Network explains a mindset that is very much alive and well in the world. Mm-hmm. It would only have to change. Honestly, the closest thing to a redo of Network that was done correctly is The Social Network. There's a reason it has that name. Mm-hmm. To be fair, that's the closest anybody's come to doing Network again. And it's a very different film. It's a much more humane, personal film than Network. It is not in the sense that it is the satire that Network is, just in the sense that it is an exploration of the mindset that requires the need to control thought, or how a particular mindset's ability to control what people consume will change how those people who are consuming that product. Those are slightly different things, but they're certainly related, and they're worth comparing and contrasting those two films. Network to me didn't truly become arguably passe, honestly, until Trump.
Yes.
Honestly, that was the point where I think even Chayefsky couldn't go there.
Yeah.
Chayefsky couldn't or wouldn't let himself fathom that.
I saw this the year after he was elected. The winter after he was elected. Yeah.
When it was apparent that he was actually going to have a shot to win the election, to me, I went, oh, this is it then. This is the point where Network has finally been passed. It is no longer ahead of its time. Time has finally passed, and that's a hell of a run for 40 years to be ahead of your time. It's really good. This is not a slight on Network or in any way to indicate you shouldn't see Network, because you really should.
Yeah, no.
Just to say that, what it presents is going to seem very old fashioned, but I think the mindset that it is articulating is very much alive and well.
Yeah, it's very much this thing. Like, I can imagine, 45 years ago, going in and being, wow, this is so outlandish. This is so crazy. Can you believe, this is what Paddy Chayefsky's talking about, what he thinks would happen or where we're going. And now the mindset is, yeah, it feels sad to watch it, right? Like, not that the movie, not in the way that the movie's bad, but because, oh yeah, what was crazy is our reality. The whole mad as hell speech, right? Which is the iconic moment of the movie. It's what everyone remembers from the movie. That's the other day I was on Twitter and someone was talking about how they were confused that I can't remember what it was, but someone had said something and people were mad at them for saying that. Even God, I don't know. It was some way people were angry online and someone was shocked. And the whole conversation came back to everyone's angry, but they don't know what to be angry about. Right? Like,
yes.
And that's what social media taps into, is this feeling that, wow, I'm pissed off about something, and it gives me that outlet. And that's what Howard Beale is. He's that angry person, and everyone resonates with that, even though they don't know why. They're not Howard Beale. They but they know the world's been spinning them bullshit, right? And they're angry about it. And they can scream about it, but can't do anything about it.
And again, the part of the center of the film, Howard Beale's insane.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Let's be very clear that the character himself is off the deep end insane already. Yeah. And they are, the network allows this madman on the air, and then sees the success and allows it to continue, which is what, the film is called Network. It's not called the Howard Beale story. It is an attack on capitalism. It is which makes for me, yes, I'm mad as I'm not going to make it anymore, is the most famous speech in the movie, but the best speech in the movie belongs to the dearly departed Ned Beatty.
Ned Beatty, yep.
Yes.
Yep. I just rewatched that today too, because I was it's so good.
Who explains that, to Howard Beale that you have messed with the primal forces of nature and you will atone.
Oh, it's a Coen Brothers moment to me.
Except the
Coen was way before that.
Played it, and that's the thing. It is that scene is. I can't imagine the Coen Brothers doing that scene, because the point of that scene is Ned Beatty scaring the hell out of the crazy dude. The Coens would do it to make fun of Ned Beatty.
Yes.
And that's not what the point of that scene is. I mean, Chayefsky is using the words to point out how insane this point of view is, but the scene is not making fun of not making fun of that speech. It's about how powerful that speech is, and how frighteningly true it is. It is the point at which you could tell Chayefsky is mad as hell and can't take it anymore. He had to write this movie to get that level of mad out. It is interesting that Howard Beale is almost an admission of why he's writing the movie to begin with. And that's such a great speech. And there are other moments in the movie that are so smart and I love it when the funniest laugh for me in the movie still to this day is when the Angela Davis character starts spouting off about knowing all the percentages on her back end deal and her production costs for the show that she's putting together, starring this Symbionese Liberation Army knockoff group that the movie uses. That's so funny and so on point. And again, like we're saying with Dog Day Afternoon, it would only take a minor, you wouldn't have to change much of that speech at all. You just have to change the media that's involved. And that would still fly today. That would still absolutely work today.
The thing that makes me laugh, and it's just a piece of set design. It's when they reveal the new news set, and it's this game show set, and
yes,
it's still the one thing that to me feels slightly like, oh, okay, at least we didn't get there. But now I'm thinking back, and I'm like, maybe we did get there, because we haven't gotten the game show set for the news, but the news has definitely become, entertainment, and it makes me laugh is how outlandish that is. But then you think about, they give the mad prophet of the airwaves, and that's Fox News. Like,
oh yeah,
like that's what they've done, is taken that person who's spouting the nonsense and the rants, who gets the ratings, and they've given him their own hour.
Yes. If Chayefsky had just made him president, it would still be of its time.
Yeah.
That's the only thing he would have had to have done to make this work. But again, that wasn't his point. What he, it still is, because like I was saying, this is an attack on how a dollar first mindset is going to ruin the country. Those of us who hold a particular opinion of the former president would find that to be strictly on point.
The other thing is, when Howard Beale starts talking about that and revealing that to people, that's when they lose interest too.
Yes.
And that is the part to me that feels the most real. When it's not getting them lathered up, but it's, there's a real problem that you can't really do anything about, but you still need to know about it. And people turn the channel. Like,
it is an unsparing look at the people who are so gung ho to be moved by it. Yes, it is. There is definitely a lash or two of the 40 lashes this film distributes for the audience that buys into this and wants to be a part of it and makes it a hit. And it is still fascinating to me that as much as I talked about this being an unreal world, and it's not that it is unreal, it's just heightened. Yeah, and that's because of Chayefsky's dialogue. Like I was saying, nobody talks in this film in any sort of normal way. Everybody's talking like they are the smartest person on the planet in the most articulate tumble of words you've ever heard. But that said, I utterly buy that premise. Like I the Howard Beale on-air meltdown, and how it comes in two phases. They spend a lot of time setting this up, that he has his first sort of big moment on the air and they want to shut it down. And the beautiful machinations of plot that get him put back on the air. And then after they're trying to make it happen, nobody loses interest, everybody's kind of ward off. And then he breaks down again.
Yeah.
And that's what spikes it and takes off the rest of the movie. That's utterly plausible.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is why the film does still work, as heightened as it is. You buy the premise. And that's a really great achievement, and where you're absolutely right that Lumet helps ground that. I mean, that's still baked into Chayefsky's script for sure. It is set up really well, as unrealistic as the dialogue is. But yes, Lumet certainly helps make this all seem like, well, this is just happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, it's engrossing.
It's the same thing that makes Dog Day Afternoon work so well, is it understands humanity so well. It just understands that darker impulse of humanity, that we're going to latch on to the angry person, even if we don't share why they're angry. They're angry, we're angry. But also, the dollar's going to roll over everyone. Like, it's going to be more important than the president. It's going to be more important than, it's why wars are fought. And at the end of the day, and that's only become more true in the last 45 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's a movie that was very prophetic, which is why it's so weird to watch, because what seemed outlandish is really Yeah, okay, that came true. You know, we have not talked though. So we did Chinatown for our last episode. And so I was wondering, we haven't brought up Faye Dunaway at all in this.
Yeah. Faye Dunaway got her Oscar for this movie. And I don't have a problem with that. So my problem with Faye Dunaway has always been this, and there are a handful of performers who fall into this trap for me. There's a very big example of it with an actress who's very popular today. I don't believe Faye Dunaway is untalented. My problem is just that she always strikes me as someone who knows she's being filmed. Yes. Not to the point that she is self-conscious. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not saying in a bad actor way. I'm just saying in a way that to me, she very rarely feels lived in. You know, so and all you need to do is to imagine her as one of the hostages in Dog Day Afternoon to realize what I'm talking about. she never seems like she's there and is this real person. It is always, she always has that feeling she gives that she's always being recorded and knows it. And when you can use that really well. There are a lot of actors who suffer from this and they can still be used well. You know, that's why she's great in Chinatown. Honestly, she is always concerned with how she is presenting herself in Chinatown. The character is. So it works. That's why she's great, as awful as Mommy Dearest is. That's why it's a great performance. It really is a great performance. I mean, it's unhinged by bad direction and a ridiculous screenplay, but she's committing to that, and that is a character who is always concerned with how she appears, and I think that plays absolutely into her particular her particular, I don't want to say skill set, but her particular idiosyncrasies as an actress. And again, this is common. I absolutely believe that this is the problem with Jessica Chastain. I think Jessica Chastain is very talented, and I have never gotten the feeling that she's a real person ever on screen. I always get the feeling that she knows she's being filmed. Sure. And she knows she's being watched. Even when she was on SNL, it's like she can't quite, there's something about her that she can't let go. And there's certainly, they're not the only two. Lots of actors suffer from this. So she's great here. She is more than capable of handling Chayefsky's dialogue. She's very funny. She lands all of the jokes in this script. I think I think it was very liberating to watch her play someone so totally heartless.
Yeah.
When she has her most inhumane speeches, she's actually at her best in the movie.
Oh yeah, when they're talking about the assassination at the end, and it's just like that made me laugh. Yeah. I noticed what you were saying. There's the scene where Max goes to break up with her, and she walks into the kitchen at one point, and she grabs a teacup, and her hand is like visibly shaking, but it almost like you could see her like making sure we saw her banging the teacup on the saucer.
Yes,
but I think something about that works for me, because there is something about her that is just supposed to feel off and then unnatural. Like she.
Oh yeah, we're told. Yes.
So it doesn't bother me, but I know what you're saying on that.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean that as a whole. That is my impression of her in everything I've ever seen her in. She just carries that with her, and some directions she's really well. And it doesn't hurt her here because. Chayefsky, and I do mean Chayefsky, not Lumet, makes it very clear. There's a speech where he says she is television.
Yeah.
She is this cold, heartless machine that wants only viewers and nothing else matters. And it's very, and it is probably to Lumet's credit most of all that, yes, this incredibly almost one-dimensional attack on a mindset that is worthy to attack feels at least a little balanced and nuanced thanks to what Lumet brings to it.
Yeah, I love Chayefsky's script in this. I know I saw The Hospital years ago.
I like that movie too.
And I remember really liking that. But what I love is it's something not everyone can pull off when you write these big florid scripts with, think of the Beatrice Straight talking about,
Yes.
the winter passion and
Yes.
all that. That should not work with most writers. That would fall flat and feel, it would feel false, and it never feels real, but it feels, I buy it. And I think it is the grounding and it's the actors. And it's just that Chayefsky's so good at, he knows how to play.
Yeah, it's the consistency of the writing throughout that whole script. That speech shouldn't work. There are dozens of speeches in this film that shouldn't work, but they all work because they are all written on this wavelength.
Yeah.
And that combination of Lumet grounding it while still letting that poetic dialogue go is great. And I think it's partly because I'm not what I'm about to say is not to say Chayefsky is Shakespeare. It's simply to say that, if you see Shakespeare performed properly, it doesn't matter if you don't catch all of it and if it doesn't all make sense to you. It was written to be performed. And if there's an actor who can bring about the emotional response of the speech to you in how it is delivered, it will play. And that's the same thing in this. You don't even have to be listening to the words. You don't have to catch all of it to understand the motivations for the characters from scene to scene. And that's why it's really, he was a great screenwriter. It was not just a great writer, he was a great screenwriter. And this cast is, we've already mentioned William Holden, Faye Dunaway, Ned Beatty, Peter Finch, Robert Duvall, who has probably the single most wonderful vulgar line in the whole film, which is, "I got a great big titted hit." That's fantastic. Just fantastic. And that everybody knows how to deliver that dialogue really well. This script could have gone horrifically wrong in so many hands. And Lumet was perfect to do it, and this cast was perfect to do it.
Yeah, Dave Itzkoff wrote a really good book on the making of this movie. It's called Mad as Hell, obviously, but it's really good. But it kind of coming on the heels of reading it after the Chinatown book, I was almost disappointed because it seemed like a very shoot, and I kind of missed the chaos of the Chinatown one. But one thing I had not realized was that Peter Finch died when he was doing the rounds for this. This was his, he had retired by this point, and this was kind of his, I'll come back. I'm kind of getting the bug again. And then he dies right afterwards, and it's just such a good performance.
Yes.
I had not realized that. I had also not realized Chayefsky did not do a ton after this.
No, just Altered States in the hospital. Yeah. Right? I think the hospital comes after this.
Hospital was before this.
Is it really? Oh, it is. That's right. That's like 71 or something like that.
Yep, because he originally wanted George C. Scott for the Howard Beale role.
Yeah, I kind of do too. But I kind of think George C. Scott should have been in everything. I think after this just comes Altered States, which of course is the movie that killed him, because there is, as Pauline Kael said, no more insane combination of artists than Paddy Chayefsky and Ken Russell. That should never have happened. And that, Chayefsky was, for people who don't know this, Paddy Chayefsky was the most, not only sort of respected, but genuinely powerful writer in Hollywood for about 25 years, to the point that he had it in his contract that not only did his picture appear in the corner of the movie posters that he wrote, they couldn't change his dialogue without his permission.
Yeah.
You had to film every word, and every word had to be on the screen unless he allowed it to go otherwise. And that leads to the famous, if you've ever seen Altered States, Ken Russell, who doesn't do anything Ken Russell doesn't want to do, bristled at this and had actors literally like delivering words while their mouth was full of food, like to make it unintelligible. Like you couldn't understand what they were saying, but they were saying it. And the battle and the remarkable ill health in which Chayefsky kept himself at that point led to a heart attack not long after Altered States came out, a fatal heart attack.
Well, that's sad.
Which of course, well, then of course that leads to the famous moment that we saw, if you know the story, tying this all back to the man who wrote that great book about Chinatown and his book about Bob Fosse, or if you saw Fosse Verdon, Bob Fosse and Peg Chevsky were very close friends, very close, and contributed to each other's. Like they showed each other what they were working on, and they both influence. You can see it. You can see where they influence each other's stuff, and that then Fosse famously performed a soft shoe tap number at Chayefsky's funeral because he didn't know what to say. Like he had no speak. He promised to speak and couldn't. That was all. That was the only way Fosse could express himself. And it's a really sweet moment in the book and a very powerful moment in the miniseries. And I find very touching real life story.
All right. Well, do we have anything else to say about Network or Dog Day Afternoon?
See them both. If you've never seen them, see them. Yeah. Especially Dog Day Afternoon.
I believe so. I had to rent Network, and that was really cheap on Amazon. I know that Dog Day Afternoon was on HBO Max, and it might still be.
I don't know offhand. I agree. I think I remember seeing it there. Yes.
All right.
But I'm wondering if you can still find it. There was a really great box set Warner Brothers put out a few years ago that had Dog Day Afternoon, Network, and All the President's Men.
Oh my gosh. You know what you're reminding me? A few years ago, I got this deal on this like Warner Brothers 100-year box set.
Oh, I remember that set. Oh, it's beautiful.
I got it for like $50.
Good call.
I probably rented those movies, and I probably have those.
They're there. Yeah, I think they're in there.
All right. Perry, in the meantime, as we prepare for our next episode, where can people find you?
You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at Perry Loves Film. You can hear me every Friday on the Lucy and Lance Show on WLBY. And occasionally you can hear me on the Cathode Ray Mission podcast. We have an episode coming up in September about the career of Quentin Tarantino. I'm just a little excited to be a part of.
Very nice. And a plug, keep your ears open for a future episode really soon where that might become pertinent as well.
Yes, indeed. How about you, Chris? Where can we find you?
Yeah, find me. My newsletter is the best place right now. Extra writing, extra podcasting is kind of becoming a premium right now. So this show and my newsletter are really the things I've been throwing myself into in my spare time. So go to criticisms.substack.com. I am through my series of summer of 1996 films because, spoiler alert, nothing good came out in August of 1996.
Now I'm curious. Now I'm going to do some quick research here. I'm going to see if I can steer one your way.
I considered going back to do A Time to Kill, which I remember really liking upon its release, and time got away from there. But I am at the end of where I finished up last year on my Spielberg series, which means I'm about to watch Empire of the Sun and Always and Hook, which is a threesome that seems very inconsistent. But I've had a good time with that one. I also have reviews up there of Old, and by this weekend I should have stuff up about Stillwater and The Green Knight, and maybe The Suicide Squad, which I'm hoping to check out this weekend.
Okay, Chris, there was a lot of horrible things that came out in August of 1996, but there's one absolute gem in there, which I think you should go back and do, because I bet you didn't see it at the time. Waiting for Guffman opened in August.
Oh, I've seen Waiting for Guffman. I didn't know that was the 96.
There you go.
All right.
There you go.
I love Waiting for Guffman.
Good deal. Because that's certainly oh, you know what? Sling Blade also came out that month.
Oh, that might be worth it too.
Freeway, which is actually a good movie, but it's also a month responsible for The Island of Dr. Moreau. The Fan. Remember, The Fan is a movie that takes place in a finale at a baseball game during a thunderstorm. This happens. I also love The Fan because it has it is the only movie I know of in which the main character, played by Robert De Niro, do you know what his profession is in that movie? Have we talked about this?
Oh, I don't know, but I know I've seen The Fan.
He's a knife salesman.
Yes.
That's right. So good. That's right. So good. That's so good. Oh, and also Jack. That piece of crap came out that month. Oh, August is. Oh man, August is such a dead zone.
All right. Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. And until then, I'll check out Jack.